let me ask you a fundamental question. Like right now, in this exact moment, why are you doing whatever it is you are doing?
Oh, that is the big one.
Right. And I mean, the person listening to this deep dive right now, whether you're, battling your way through a crowded highway commute or studying for a huge exam.
Or maybe just frantically prepping for a board meeting that starts in 20 minutes.
Exactly. What is the actual end game of all this toiling? Why are we all on this invisible treadmill just racking our brains day in and day out?
Well, it's the ultimate human question, isn't it? We rarely hit the pause button long enough to actually articulate the why
Yeah.
behind the daily grind.
Yeah, we just assume the treadmill is the only place to be. We just keep running.
Right. But what if we're running in the completely wrong direction?
Well, that brings us to our source for today. We found this fascinating essay by a writer named Zhu Fifeng, which was translated by Kinyu.
Yeah, it's an essay from December 9th, 2023, titled Where to Find Happiness and Bliss.
And the mission of our deep dive today is to really unpack this deeply provocative argument the author makes. The idea that humanity has spent thousands of years inventing high technology, printing global currencies, building massive political systems, and yet we are looking in the completely wrong place for joy.
I mean, the stakes here are just incredibly high.
Yeah.
The author is essentially deconstructing the very definitions of happiness and bliss to see if modern society has basically been sold a false bill of goods.
A completely false premise.
Yeah, if this essay is right, the entire foundation of our daily modern struggle might be built on this mechanical misunderstanding of what actually feels good to the human nervous system.
And what I love is that the author doesn't just use, standard dry philosophical examples.
Oh, definitely not.
Like, we aren't talking about abstract morality here. We are literally going to be comparing a modern CEO's luxury mattress to a romantic encounter in a cornfield 2,000 years ago.
It gets very specific.
Very. We're talking about barefoot duck farmers versus modern corporate schedules. So, to start us off, the author makes a very bold claim about our baseline motivation for doing, well, anything at all.
Right, so the premise here is that every single human endeavor, and I mean literally everything from going to school, working, getting married, starting a company, to even running for political office, is driven by one single underlying goal.
Okay, and what is that?
The desire to live happily, joyfully, freely, and blissfully. And the logic the author uses is quite rigid.
How so?
Well, no one sets out to become a wealthy billionaire or a famous star or a respected academic just so they can live in a state of fear, right, or sorrow. The end goal of all that ambition is always the desire for joy and freedom.
Which, I mean, sounds incredibly obvious at first. Of course we all want to be happy.
Right, but then the essay immediately uses that premise to push back really hard against a deeply ingrained societal ideal.
Oh, you mean the nobility of grand sacrifice.
Exactly. The text just drops this blunt assertion, claiming that living solely for the strength and glory of your family, your nation, your state, your party, or your religion is, and this is a direct quote from the essay, nonsense.
Wow. Nonsense. That is a striking subversion of what we are usually taught from, like kindergarten.
It really is. The author argues that if your heroic sacrifice or your inspiring struggle results in a life that is neither human nor ghostly, then it isn't actually noble.
Neither human nor ghostly. That's a heavy phrase.
Yeah, the text goes as far as to call it a personal tragedy and honestly even a disaster for both society and nature.
Okay, I have to say I'm struggling with this a bit.
How so?
Because, representing the listener here, if I sacrifice my weekend to help a good friend move out of their apartment, I am going to be exhausted.
Oh, sure. Moving is the worst.
Right. I might even be a little miserable carrying heavy boxes up 3 flights of stairs. Is the author saying I shouldn't do that? That feeling a sense of duty to my community or my friends is just a complete waste of time?
Well, that's the natural reaction.
Yeah.
Right. But we have to look at the mechanics of what the author is defining as sacrifice here.
Okay, break that down for me.
The text isn't arguing against functional altruism or, helping a friend move. The pushback is specifically directed at the kind of systemic martyrdom that utterly destroys the individual's core well-being for the sake of an abstract concept.
I see.
Yeah, the author writes that all efforts should be to make oneself and others live happily and freely. It's a dual requirement.
So helping your friend move strengthens a bond, which ultimately brings you joy in the long run.
Exactly. But if you sacrifice your entire identity to a corporate grind or some nationalistic ideal until you are just this hollow shell, neither human nor ghostly, then the system itself is broken. Nature operates on functional interconnectedness, not complete self-destruction.
Okay, so it's blind martyrdom, the kind that actually drains your capacity for joy that the text is calling out.
Correct. The essay argues that exploring the actual source of happiness and bliss is our primary task as human beings. It's what we fundamentally need to do just to keep a clear mind.
It's the prerequisite for everything else.
Yeah, and the author makes this brilliant, somewhat humorous point. Even if you suddenly died and found yourself living in a literal heaven, if you didn't understand the internal mechanism for generating happiness and bliss, you still wouldn't be happy there.
You'd just be a miserable person in a much nicer location complaining about the clouds.
Exactly. You would be relying on the same broken external mechanisms to bring you joy, even in paradise.
Okay, well, if our primary task in life, above making money or achieving status, is to find happiness and bliss, we first need to know what those words actually mean.
That's the crucial next step.
Because usually in everyday conversation, if you ask someone how they're feeling, they use those words totally interchangeably. I feel happy, I feel blissful. It's all just bundled into feeling good.
Right.
But this essay draws a razor-sharp mechanical distinction between the two, doesn't it?
It really does. This distinction is basically the absolute engine of the entire essay. It treats these two words as completely different biological and spiritual states.
Let's look at how the text defines happiness first, then.
So according to the author, happiness is dynamic. It is outward, and it is entirely external. It is the visible manifestation of inner satisfaction.
So it has volume, it's loud.
Highly visible and highly audible. It is expressed through your emotions, your language, your physical behavior, your posture.
Crucially, others can feel and see your happiness. You broadcast it to the room.
Yes. And the text ties this dynamic outward state of happiness directly to one specific action: creation.
Okay, so happiness is directly tied to the act of creating things, and other people can witness it.
Now, contrast that with the text's definition of bliss. Bliss is the complete functional opposite in how it manifests.
How so?
While bliss is static, it is inward, and it is strictly internal. The essay describes it as a sense of spiritual and mental fulfillment, achieved by being completely free from annoyance, pain, sorrow, and fear.
So bliss is basically defined by an absence of the negative, rather than actively projecting a positive emotion.
Yeah, and unlike happiness, bliss is known only to oneself. It's not something the person next to you can necessarily observe.
You could be sitting perfectly still on a park bench, completely silent, and be in a state of profound bliss.
Exactly. And just as the text strictly ties happiness to creation, it ties bliss directly to giving and dedication.
Okay, I want to try to synthesize this with a practical analogy for you listening, just to see if I am grasping the actual mechanics of this framework.
Let's hear it.
Let's say I decide to host a massive dinner party. I spend hours cooking for my closest friends.
A lot of effort, yeah.
Right. But the actual event, the loud laughter, the storytelling around the table, the literal physical creation of the meal and the atmosphere, that dynamic, outward, shared energy in the room, that is happiness.
And notice how that state requires active input. You created an experience, and that joy was broadcasted and shared among the group. It's dynamic.
Right. But then let's fast forward 3 hours. Everyone has gone home.
The party's over.
The house is completely quiet, the lights are dimmed, and I'm just standing alone at the sink washing a giant stack of dishes.
Not usually considered the fun part.
No, my feet hurt, I'm physically tired, but I feel this deep, quiet, internal peace knowing I dedicated my time and my energy to people I genuinely care about. I am not worried about work tomorrow. I am completely free from anxiety in that single moment at the sink.
Yeah.
That static, internal state that is bliss.
That captures the essay's framework perfectly. You have both halves of the human equation operating correctly there.
It's a nice balance.
It is. And the rule the essay lays down here is incredibly strict. It's almost like a law of physics. Without creation, there is no happiness. Without dedication, there is no bliss.
So you cannot consume your way into either of these states.
No, you cannot buy your way into them. You must create and you must dedicate.
Which brings us to, honestly, the most uncomfortable part of this whole philosophy.
The money question.
Yes. Because if happiness is strictly about creation and bliss is strictly about dedication, where does material wealth fit into the equation?
According to the text, it absolutely doesn't.
Yeah.
Material wealth is completely decoupled from the actual generation of either state.
But wait, how does that actually hold up in the real world? Like, we all know the cliche, money doesn't buy happiness,
Yeah.
but we also know that having money solves a lot of problems.
Of course.
And this is where the author brings in those wild historical comparisons I mentioned earlier. The essay asks us to look back at people living 1,000 years ago.
Right. They also points out the raw material reality of the past. 1,000 years ago, human beings had no computers.
Right.
They had no mobile phones, no cars, no airplanes. They had no electricity or electric devices of any kind. They didn't even have running water in their homes.
Or glass in their windows to keep the cold out.
Exactly. Their daily lives were incredibly impoverished compared to ours. The modern convenience level was zero.
Yet the author argues that their actual internal experience of happiness and bliss was no less than that of people today.
Yes. And conversely, the anxieties, the fears, and the deep emotional troubles of modern people are certainly no less than those of people in the past. We stress just as much, if not more.
The essay specifically states that the happiness of a modern city engineer is no greater than that of a grassland shepherd boy from antiquity.
In fact, the shepherd boy might actually have fewer daily worries.
And then the author fires off these incredibly vivid anecdotes to prove the point. The text asks, and this is wild, is a sexual climax on a modern, incredibly expensive Simmons mattress actually more stimulating and richer than one experienced in a cornfield 2,000 years ago?
It's a super provocative image, but it forces you to strip away the material context and look purely at the raw human experience.
It really does, and it continues. Does giving someone a modern laptop today bring an essentially different, higher level of joy than giving someone a perfectly ripe, fresh peach in ancient times? Is the lasting joy of gifting a luxury Mercedes-Benz today definitively greater than gifting a prized cow to a family hundreds of years ago?
The juxtaposition is designed to highlight a specific cognitive illusion we have. We constantly confuse the financial cost or the technological complexity of an object with the depth of the feeling it actually produces inside us.
And my absolute favorite comparison from the essay: who is definitively happier and more blissful? A woman completely adorned with diamond earrings and heavy gold necklaces, or a barefoot woman raising thousands of ducks in a pond?
A great visual.
Or what about a woman who simply picks a wildflower on a walk and wears it in her hair? Can anyone actually guarantee the woman dripping in diamonds is experiencing more joy than the woman with the wildflower?
The author is directly challenging the fundamental modern assumption that aesthetic or material upgrades correlate to spiritual or emotional upgrades.
But I have to push back on this because representing the listener here, it is very easy to sit back and romanticize poverty or the past.
Oh, for sure.
Sure, the barefoot duck farmer might be deeply content with her ducks and her wildflower, but she also didn't have antibiotics. If she got an infection, she died.
Right.
If the modern woman in diamonds gets an infection, she goes to a state-of-the-art hospital. Is the author confusing a simpler time with actual superior joy?
It is the most common critique of this kind of philosophy, and it's a fair one. But if we look at the specific mechanism the author is describing, the argument is not that technology or modern medicine is inherently evil or useless.
Okay, then what is it?
The argument is about the biological and spiritual baseline capacity for human joy. The text is asserting that our capacity for happiness and bliss hasn't increased one single bit, despite all our technological advancements.
Oh, I see. So the hardware hasn't changed.
Exactly. The human nervous system and the human soul are the hardware. A modern computer doesn't activate a new, higher-tier joy receptor in the brain that a fresh peach couldn't reach 1,000 years ago. The hardware of the human soul is completely fixed. Even if the software of society, medicine, the transportation, the comfort, has been massively upgraded.
That is a truly fascinating way to look at it. The ceiling for joy is exactly the same in a muddy cornfield as it is in a luxury penthouse.
It hasn't moved an inch.
Humanity just spent a few $1 trillion over the last millennia trying to raise a biological ceiling that physically cannot be moved.
And this realization brings the essay's philosophy crashing into the harsh reality of the modern workplace. Because if the ceiling can't be moved by money, what are we all doing at the office?
Right. How does this hardware of the soul hold up in a modern, hyper-competitive environment? The text drops the historical metaphors here and takes a hard look at right now, setting up the ultimate modern contrast.
Yeah, the author introduces two specific individuals to illustrate where true joy comes from today. Person A is a city white-collar worker. They are trapped in what is known as a 996 schedule,
which is a notoriously grueling corporate reality. It means working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. It is total physical and mental exhaustion.
I mean, it leaves almost zero time for a personal life or internal reflection. But this person A earns a solid monthly salary of 10,000 yuan, plus a year-end bonus. They have money, they have a career trajectory, they have modern status.
Okay, I'm person B.
We have person B. Person B works diligently all year long, but does not earn a single penny. No salary, no bonus, no financial accumulation whatsoever.
And the essay explicitly states that if you think the corporate worker pulling in 10,000 yuan a month is happier, you are completely wrong.
Right.
And the author doesn't just leave it as a hypothetical thought experiment. The text introduces a very specific real-world reference point here. It brings up individuals known as the Chanyuan Celestials.
The text refers to the people living in what the author calls the second home of Lifechanyuan. These are individuals who, according to the essay, have no personal salary or bonus all year round. Yet the author states as a definitive, observable fact that these Chanyuan Celestials living in the second home are happier and more blissful than the exhausted 996 city workers.
Now, obviously, our role today is to unpack the source material. We aren't here to evaluate or endorse the Lifechanyuan community itself, but we need to understand the structural point the author is making by using them as the prime example.
Exactly. We're looking at the underlying theory.
And honestly, I have to push back on this on behalf of anyone listening who works a demanding job to provide for their family. Wait, that 996 worker can pay for their child's health care. They can pay for a safe place to live.
True.
The unpaid worker is entirely vulnerable to the world. Surely the massive looming anxiety of poverty outweighs the exhaustion of corporate work.
It's the ultimate modern dilemma. But we have to view this through the lens the author has built. The essay isn't a financial advice pamphlet. It is a diagnostic of the soul.
A diagnostic of the soul. Okay.
The author explains the mechanism behind this by introducing the concepts of soul, spirit, realm, pattern, and quality.
Realm and pattern, those are very specific words.
Yeah. Think about a person's pattern as their internal operating system. The text argues that if someone is selfish, if they are driven by ego, if they are ungrateful and unwilling to dedicate themselves to others.
If their operating system is programmed to constantly calculate worth by comparing themselves to their neighbors.
Exactly. If that's the case, then they will inevitably crash. Even if that person is living in a literal palace served by a massive staff, their internal pattern guarantees sorrow.
Because an operating system built on comparison and ego is a zero-sum game. You are constantly protecting your hoard, measuring your success against someone else's, and terrified of losing what you have. The anxiety is basically built right into the code.
Precisely. Conversely, the text outlines the programming that actually guarantees joy. A person who is grateful, selfless, highly creative, giving, and reasonable.
So the complete opposite.
The essay argues that a person running on this internal realm, even if they are living in a thatched cottage and eating the most basic meals, will always live happily and blissfully. Their operating system is open source. The output, the giving and creating, is the reward itself.
It perfectly clicks back to those strict definitions from the beginning of the essay. If happiness requires creation and bliss requires dedication, then ego and selfishness are the exact functional opposites of those states.
Right.
Ego is entirely about hoarding, taking, and isolating. It cannot create or dedicate.
And that explains why the unpaid worker, in the author's example, is experiencing higher levels of bliss. Their daily life is entirely focused on dedication and creation, completely free from the anxiety of the 9096 grind, which is inherently tied to chasing money, status, and competitive advantage.
Things the text has already established cannot chemically or spiritually generate joy. Think about your own internal pattern for a second if you are listening to this on your commute or at your desk. When you scroll through social media and see a colleague's massive promotion or a friend's brand new car, what happens to your internal architecture? Does it crash? Do you feel a spike of anxiety or envy?
If so, according to this text, your realm and pattern are misaligned with your actual goal of being happy.
It really forces you to take a massive step back. I mean, humanity built the United Nations. We invented complex, digitized global currencies. We formed massive interlocking political, educational, and corporate organizations, all fundamentally trying to engineer safety, comfort, and happiness.
We built a giant machine.
We built this incredibly complex, incredibly stressful global machine to chase a feeling. And yet, the actual key to happiness and bliss Bliss, according to the author, requires zero currency. It requires absolutely no social status. It only requires the one thing human beings are often most terrified to give up: our ego.
It is a profound paradox. The more complex the societal systems we build to capture and commodify joy, the further we distance ourselves from the raw, simple acts of creation and dedication that actually produce it in our nervous system.
We're getting in our own way.
We're essentially trying to buy the static inward piece of bliss, but it can only be earned through the active outward process of selfless giving.
So, to summarize the framework we've explored today, we started by deconstructing the deeply held myth that we are meant to work ourselves into the ground on this treadmill for some noble, abstract cause, when really at our core, the only functional goal is to live joyfully and freely.
Right.
We learned that happiness isn't just a vague feeling of good. It is the dynamic, outward, highly visible joy that comes exclusively from the act of creation. And bliss isn't just relaxing on the couch. It is the quiet, static, deeply internal peace that comes exclusively from dedication and giving.
And we've seen, through some incredibly vivid historical metaphors, that material wealth is a false metric when it comes to joy. Whether we are talking about a fresh peach or a modern laptop, a luxury Simmons bed or a cornfield, the biological and spiritual capacity of the human heart hasn't changed. The ceiling is fixed.
And finally, we saw through the sharp contrast of the exhausted 996 corporate worker and the unpaid, diligent celestials of Lifechanyuan that our internal operating system, our spiritual realm and pattern, dictates our reality infinitely more than our bank accounts ever could.
The author actually leaves the reader with a very direct, unvarnished final message. The text states that humanity has struggled for thousands of years, racking its brains and shedding blood for money, office, and power.
Yeah.
The author essentially looks the reader in the eye and asks, have you found the key to happiness, joy, freedom, and bliss yet? If you have, congratulations. But if you haven't, the author extends an open invitation to find it in the second home created by Lifechanyuan. It is a highly confident conclusion to a radical reimagining of human value.
It certainly is. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, listening right now, with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day, something that builds on the foundation of this essay but applies directly to the future we are walking into.
Okay, let's hear it.
The text draws a very hard, non-negotiable line, telling us that true happiness comes from creation and true bliss comes from dedication. But look at the modern world we are actively building at this very second. We are spending billions of dollars developing artificial intelligence to automate our creations. We want algorithms to generate our art, write our code, and compose our emails.
Wow, yeah.
And simultaneously, we are building advanced robotics to automate our acts of service and dedication. We want machines to take care of the chores, do the dishes after the dinner party, and tend to the fields.
That's true.
If we succeed in outsourcing all of our daily creation to AI and all of our daily dedication to robots, are we accidentally outsourcing the only two true biological sources of our own happiness and bliss?
That is a genuinely sobering question. If the hardware of the soul requires creation and dedication to function, what happens when we simply refuse to use the hardware?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the next time you find yourself incredibly stressed out, running as fast as you can on that invisible treadmill, ask yourself, is your daily pattern running toward creation and dedication? Or are you just running toward a slightly more expensive Simmons mattress? Keep creating, keep dedicating. We'll see you on the next deep dive.